Pilates. My name is Michael Miller. This is a Michael Miller trademark training video out to you because you're watching. Thank you. It's meant for Michael Miller Pilates licensed affiliates, the Core New Core, and anyone interested in surviving and thriving as a Pilates instructor. So it's Monday, and now I have 7 things to go through, titles or subjects to mention. And the first one is, I put first because it would draw the most attention, and if that's all you're interested in as a title, if you were to read them, like when I type them out before I do Facebook. The first one is called Long Spine Perversion. And for me, perversion is where you bend something out of its normal, you pervert it. And the long spine that's taught where your legs come to vertical and then the carriage doesn't move while your body rolls up off of its back onto its shoulders, and that the legs may apart or not or move a little bit or whatever, but then the body comes back down without the carriage moving as well. The key part there, the distinction there, is that you're saying roll up and come down without moving the carriage. And to me, that's making the way you do it more important than the purpose of what you're doing. So it's a perversion of the purpose of the exercise. Because to me, the purpose of the exercise is to be stretching out through your spine as you roll down onto your back with straight legs. There's a short spine and there's a long spine, and one key distinguishing feature between those two names is that one is done with knees bending and the other one done with legs straight. So you might affiliate that with short spine being bent knees and long spine being straight legs. In any event, the distortion to me of looking for the control of not moving the carriage and going up and down, just feel it for yourself. In one case, I can do either, but one is working within a box to achieve a result in the equipment, when my purpose in the long spine is to roll through the spine as decompressively as I can, always within control, but expanding the range by the depth of control that you exert. Without limiting it to a box within which it happens. Okay, so now you've heard that remark about perversion, and we can go on to number 2, which is that pain is personal. Pain is personal. And in that regard, I cannot do your hundreds for you. And you can't do my hundreds for me. And in that same regard, the pain that a human being feels that isn't within the empathetic realm, but their own hardwired pain is personal. And why do I say anything about this? Because I know so little bit about it, and I don't mean to be glib. I mean that it's really humbling as an instructor to work with a student or students who are in chronic pain, and for me, they were usually new to Pilates and searching for any way out of the pain that was chronic, that is chronic. My point to you as an instructor is that you may not be able to affect the pain. I mean, I always want to believe it makes it better, and that the conditioning that you do in Pilates, makes you better, and hopefully it helps you escape the pain that you're in. But apart from a result, MMP is about the moment that you're in, and that the same thing applies for a person that's in pain as a person who's not. And that is that there's a necessity for their capacity in observing to coordinate with their thinking and their being. Okay? So, what role do you play as a Pilates instructor, especially when you're dealing with a subject, the subject is pain, and you're dealing with a student that's in pain? From the MMP point of view, knowing what your target is helps you go about aiming for it and hitting it, regardless of the pain that the student might be in, especially if it's chronic. The pursuit of Pilates might or might not eventually get you out of pain, but the doing of it is conditioning that's ideal conditioning within the physics and the biology that we find ourselves in. And the biology that we're in personally doesn't change the physics that we're in. Just perhaps how we experience it, but the physics don't change, I don't think. Okay, from person to person, we all may be our own little black hole universes, but to the extent that the world that we participate has the consistency of physics and the consistency within that, and the presence and the availability of observing to enhance one's performance of one's efforts, like exercise, like the training of the choreography of Pilates. So number 3, which sounds maybe the other end of the spectrum of subjects, but I've often said that embodiment is the ultimate authority. Embodiment is the ultimate authority. And all I can say is that from the MMP point of view, the embodiment is the complete coordination of body, mind, and spirit as a state of being in the body in the moment of the doing. And so it's the ability to be in that level of that state of coordination that is the ultimate authority. And so this is actually good. Why is that so? Why isn't the intellect going to decide what's superior or not? And the essence to that is that the intellect is only the thinking and the participation of the of grasping for the target, the complete coordination of being, thinking, and observing. And so as long as thinking only plays a capacity among others that are coordinated as is evidenced by the embodiment of that, you might be a master at anything in the performance of anything that requires your being, your thinking, and your observing. And that is the experience of complete coordination of body, mind, and spirit. And that's Joe's definition. And then right next to that, after that, comes the next paragraph. Contrology develops the body uniformly. And then the sequence of the exercises in his book. And it's in the sequence of his exercises that you pursue the definition. See what I'm saying? And so, mastery of the method, to me, is mastery of the ability to completely coordinate body, mind, and spirit. And in the pursuit of performing Joe's choreography. So let me go on. Number 4. So Joe's definition, Joe's promise, and Joe's sequence. My definition of core new tension and my definition of the ideal within Joe's original work are the 5 things to know verbatim, by heart, memorized, if you want to stand in front of any group of people and explain the MMP point of view. And you could just do it to explain CT as a point of view as well, if it has nothing to do with Pilates, but you want to introduce someone to core new tension. Number 4, I'm still hooked up on or engrossed in a conversation internally with another teacher I interacted with, wrote with, back and forth, about the pursuit of distinguishing between comprehensive Pilates instructors and everybody else, which I think is a human interaction or desire in any field of interest that you care about, is in your own mind at least, understanding a difference between what you do and what all that you see claimed as what you say you do, that has very little to do with what you think of doing when you're doing what you say you do, which is, for me, being a Pilates instructor, right? So in the pursuit of this distinction and preserving the purity of and knowing that there's a difference between a comprehensive something versus a disseminated, or fractured, or partial might be a good word, on the opposite side of comprehensive, or incomplete. How about that? Incomplete. And so in this pursuit and this passion to go after something, to hold value in what someone holds value in, like their view of Pilates or their sense of distinction between a comprehensive view versus an incomplete one, and what that means, and how to know, and that, with all the bravery of naivety, it seems, an academic paper would come out of this, and then it would be the academic paper that would give weight to this distinction of comprehension. Okay? In a way, I'm all for that. And this interaction has helped me look at what is considered to be an academic paper And that's a reasoned argument based on evidence. That's how I get the definition of a academic paper that this teacher is in pursuit of to claim a difference between comprehensive and incomplete. Okay. So what I want you to hear, if you're listening, is that my whole profession in Pilates can be considered an academic paper in that it looks at the evidence, it actually specifies which evidence it looks at, and then makes a reasoned argument. And for me, that argument is that there's an idea within Joe's original work that results in a very real sensation. And that's just one point of view out of the 10,000. You have to determine your own, and hopefully part of the simulation that you're creating about what the real world is like out there includes the MMP point of view toward Pilates. In the MMP point of view, it's like, well, what evidence? And it's all too easy, even in a text, to say the evidence is Joe's definition, Joe's promise, and Joe's sequence. And I felt like I was just totally blown off as too simplistic. And maybe that's the case, but what I want you to know is the MMP point of view bases its point of view on those three pieces of evidence out of Joe's book. And doesn't need any more evidence to get to the ideal within Joe's original work. And see, that's the point. And that's where you have to start reading between the lines and seeing behind the curtain and adding two and two and directing your own thinking to survive and thrive as a Pilates instructor. So, do you have any more evidence? I mean, is there any more evidence? Well, just within Joe's original work, if you have access to enough of his words and his pictures and his film, right? All of that evidence reinforces the reasoned argument based on the three things out of Joe's book. So that's one sphere of evidence that is in existence. And to me, all you need is Joe's book and those three things in Joe's book. But the rest of his original work all reinforces the ideal within all of the work. More evidence than that? Well, I think what I'm thinking here is that I have to go to hermit.com, or to me, the fact that the preeminent dictionary of Joe's work is at hermit.com. So here's a dictionary, right? And if what you're looking for are all of the exercises, 98% of the exercises of Joe's original work, not Joe's work, not Joe's film, not Joe's pictures, but what I recreated to try to represent the content without stealing the license of the original copyright holders of the original pictures or film, even though there aren't really any. Hermit.com is the site of the preeminent dictionary on Pilates exercises. I'm not saying it has 100%. 98% is what I've always said. And this recent push into the, the, the sitting chair, the spring chair that you sit in, to whatever extent that apparatus is being is being shown, and exercises are shown on it, because of what you know about the grammar of Pilates, you can look at what's happening on the chair or what's presented on the chair and see how much it resonates with or has little connection to the ideal within Joe's original work. See, and that's what matters. Not that the content all point to the same thing, but that you represent the ideal within the original content and can make a discernment or a distinction about what is or isn't Pilates, what isn't comprehension. See, what's comprehensive? If comprehensive means spending 2 years studying exercises at a very good, expensive school that stops short of actually letting you know about the MMP point of view, and that there is grammar in it, and that there is a target in it insofar as you reach for Joe's definition as a state of being in the body in the moment of the doing, which is no more than the human being paying attention, observing what's going on, right? Being concentrated on the purpose of the exercise. It's not more complicated than that. It just acknowledges that the capacity of your observing as a human being, this concentrating on the purpose of the exercise that Joe writes about, is implicit to the experience, the participation of observing and thinking and being. There's the original song, and then there's everyone else's cover of the song. And Joe's song is an original. And all of us are making a cover of Joe's song. MMP is a cover that is an ideal of Joe's song. There's a lot of views in the world out there where Joe doesn't matter, there is no song, and it's all jazz. And even that, see, in a way, teaching Pilates is like jazz, because it's improv and it's fluid and one thing is connected to another, but where it goes and how it gets there, you don't know until after the fact. That's just a personal opinion about how jazz might be like, how being an instructor turns out. In terms of evidence, by far, I think the oldest and the most public of databases that show the exercises is at hermit.com. And if something exists that's more extensive, it's in private hands and you don't have any access to it like you do in MMP. Now, maybe you're listening to this and you're going to go to hermit.com and it's some completely different thing. It might be because to survive as a Pilates instructor might mean selling a very precious domain name. Or it may have been withdrawn from the public and turned over to a publishing house to make a book out of, or books out of? Hermit.com. I know it's not the best memory menu-driven structure, but I did it and it works, and I haven't had to deal with it or pay to have it all changed and control of it turned over to somebody else. So that dictionary, by the way, I hardly ever look at statistics, but say there's about 3,000 unique visitors to my site a month. Okay? And in terms of where do they go the most often? Can you guess? Where do they go? What information do they want from the de facto database on Pilates? They want information on the reformer. And then what do they want right after that? They want information on the Cadillac. And then what do they want right after that? They want Joe's words from his book, Return to Life Through Contrology. So those words are on a file that I used to have on my website, and then the source publisher took issue, and I took it down on my website. Now there's only a link to the thing on somebody else's website that I have no control over. Isn't that interesting? So Reformer, Cadillac, and then Joe's words, and in Joe's book. And those words, ironically enough, are the three things, the definition, the promise, and the sequence, that MMP is based on. So in terms of evidence, I not only give you just those three things out of Joe's book, but I give you a lifetime of documenting Joe's original work to the point where it's in situ, means that it's in place, and it's open to the public, and it has been for probably decades. 20 years, I'll bet. I finished most of that 20 years ago. And now if you say, well, look at everything that has evolved since. Well, to me, I don't care about the evolution of it, because it is the essence of the origin that I point to, and why I'm here trying to help you see the difference between everything that you can make with sugar versus sugar itself. So, number 6, that was number 4, was the academic paper and the evidence. Just look at the evidence. Look at my blog. Now again, on a blog they say that wouldn't be evidence. That's all subjective. And I can see where an academic paper might not want to entertain blog entries. But within the blog themselves, in the MMP point of view, I'm looking at the math of spiral torsion springs and the math of the Euler curve, also called the Cornu spiral, okay, of which there is an integral done by Fresnel. But it's this physics shape in the world out there, and this physics tension in the world out there, that in the MMP point of view, the human body reaches into in the way it engages itself to distribute load, to sense alignment, to move more efficiently and fluidly through space. So, in the tsunami wave of Pilates passion and the interest in preserving what you find near and dear about that word, Pilates, from all of the 10,000 views that are created of it, and the vast spectrum of that, and how challenging it is to have any sense of identity when it seems like there really is none. other than clinging to your aristocratic roots, and or to just the aristocratic roots that exist, not just yours, but all of them. My point of concern is that the tsunami wave will sweep away the aristocratic roots as well as all the other roots, because humanity will make of it whatever it chooses, which I think it always does in any way, in any field, right? By the attention and the perception, and not regardless of what the projection is, to the extent that it has any essence of its own. See, and that's the whole tug of war. And that's why I want you to be aware of the high ground of an ideal point of view, because the ideal point of view has more of a reasoned argument based purely on the work of Joseph Pilates, on the originator, on the name holder of the human being that the word came to mean so much to so many, right? And when you can at least access within a perspective that rests upon that human being's words in his pivotal book, right? And his only real book that addresses contrology. The power and the impact of Pilates has been that, lacking definition, it has allowed so much improvisation. Knowing the ideal will help you know if it's good improv, or have an opinion, not know maybe, but have an opinion on whether it's good improv or bad improv, right? And if comprehensive can only be, or is only going to stay at a level of aristocratic historical reenactment, right? The pressure on claiming distinction might be good enough, and there are many, I think, who, most of the culture, that's all they have. And so this ties into where I'm coming from in number six, where it's number 6, like that, number 6. MMP is a threat to classical Pilates. All of it is a threat to classical Pilates. And to the extent that you can't really make a distinction about what is or isn't classical Pilates, then the distinction cannot be held. You can't keep it up, right? Other than if it's only a culture of, see, that's where, okay, and that takes me right into 6 and then 7. See, as anything different from what is familiar or is perceived as a threat, the point of view of the ideal within Joe's work, to the extent that that has any validity at all, ends up being the foundation all share. And so it isn't just a fricassee of self-interest determining essence, as much as an acknowledgement of essence, that then the fricassee makes what they wish out of it. You know, what you make out of sugar. And so it's a catch-22. And in that regard, MMP is the cavalry, in that to save you from being swallowed by the tsunami wave of Pilates passion, without a real comprehension of an essence within that exists. It's not going to matter how classical you are, or how modern you are, or how evolved you are. Because the essence already is coagulating its own. That's a good way of putting it. And it's only a matter of where you stand to be, where you choose to place your point of view. Because the reality within will establish a source of reflection to all of our points of view. And in that regard, see, so knowing about or claiming any familiarity with the ideal within Joe's work gives you one more aspect of claiming distinction from the 10,000 views that are out there. And if you're looking for a reasoned argument about what Pilates is, MMP, it's all about reason. And yet, including the reason that we have to believe in and be aware of and engage our powers of observing, our capacity to observe. And that goes right up to the spire on top of the castle in terms of perception, or the point is that it's the reasoned argument that being, thinking, and observing can be coordinated, and that it can be coordinated aiming for ideal performance and therefore control of the conditioning that you do with your body. So I don't think, in my opinion, anything will ever replace the choreography of Joe's work. It's just too pure and too comprehensive in its own right to ever be anything other than what it is and only messed with after that, so that anybody that's truly serious about what it is would reach for the capacity of the embodiment that's there without need of anything else. And so, it's easy to think that Pilates just is whatever it's going to be and it has no essence of its own, just look around. And that's a good argument. And that, I think, argument will continue to be the case because Pilates is just a word, like yoga, that has no specific claim on itself for an essence of its own, other than when interpreted by somebody else or some group. Okay? What can be considered as much of a threat as anything, or more of a threat really, to even think of reducing what I love and cherish as anything more than the rich heritage of who I learned it from and how much time it took me to learn it and all of that. At least having a clear, reasoned argument based on evidence straight from the human being that made their gift to the world, And yet, see, most of Pilates, in many ways, there's no reason to it, and everyone seeks a reasoned argument or seeks an academic paper that will then give them the authority to claim the distinction that they have an understanding that you don't, or that they don't, or that I don't. And that's probably all true now, and has been true, and will be true. But nothing can give you more confidence about who you are as an instructor than, first of all, knowing in the first place that you can ask why about Pilates and get an answer from the MMP point of view. Not all, it's what makes MMP distinctive. Is you can explain why it is what it is. You can explain the whole thing. And that's not attractive if your whole teaching and wish to perceive it is embedded in and desirous of mystique and aristocratic privilege. All of that is part of the culture. So, MMP is alive. That was number 7. Number 7. And MMP is alive. If you're into idolatry, idolizing your ancestry is a natural, let's see, Ramanujan comes to mind because he knew he was writing things that would someday others would find value in. And to this day, we discovered notebooks that help us do the math about black holes. Right? For me, from my point of view, MMP is alive because it's coming from an ideal place that Joe's original work points to, and in an experience that you're after in performing that choreography. That no matter what you do, that you make up. We, a few discussions ago, talked about, how do I know if when I make something up, if it's Pilates or not? Right? Well, there are always those other ways of evaluating that or gaining confidence in that, by who you are and who you know and who you worked with and how much other stuff you've added to what you already know about this one thing. It's like how much of the baggage that you bring in or the experience that you bring in matters to Pilates. And in some ways, it's everything, because Pilates is only part of the baggage or experience that you accumulate, that then it's all about you, the instructor. But MMP is alive, I guess, in and of its own right as an ideal, and it's you as an instructor participating in your awareness and comprehension, your understanding of that ideal, that flows out through a fluid pen of your own creativity in whatever you decide, however you decide to do it. Because for me, I could watch someone not teaching, not in a Pilates studio, and a person making exercise with another person, a teacher, an instructor, and a student. And just by what they made them do, regardless of whether it was recognizable as original work or not, right? Why is that? Because I would recognize progressive pattern, flexion, extension, side bending, rotation, and torsion, right there in Joe's sequence. I would recognize loading, right there in Joe's sequence. I would recognize flow right there in Joe's sequence, and especially in all the film. I don't rely on the film, but the exercises are meant to be done progressively. In the progression of the exercises themselves, of the loading themselves, of the tension that you engage in. It's one thing to know you're after complete coordination of body, mind, and spirit. It's another to know how to get there. It's another to know how to participate in the ideal as though it's your students' whimsy and pursuit that got you there. So for me, what is Pilates? And so the evidence, the evidence. Joe's three things: definition, promise, and sequence. And the evidence I add to that would be core new tension, and then my reasoned argument is the ideal within the original work. So see, core new tension is much easier to immediately embrace, engage in, and may take a while of muscles to loosen up and body muscles to strengthen, right? To find the derived sensation of alignment that comes off of that, but it's there. And so the only thing I care about in terms of comprehension about Pilates, actually, well, the more comprehensive you are in Pilates training, the more words you learn, the more likely it is the grammar that glues it all together will be obvious. Unless you don't really want there to be grammar, because it undermines the aristocratic position by having to acknowledge that, yeah, there is an ideal there. It's not just who I work with and what I made of it and what I'm passing on. MMP is not historical reenactment. It's pursuit of history in the making. And by that I mean that you pursue the history, you pursue the choreography, you pursue uniform eccentric loading, flowing through progressive patterns of movement. In such a way that you combine your being, thinking, and observing in the performance, in the pursuit of the state of being you're in, or the vibration you're in, or the level of awareness and presence that you're in from having done that. It's not about what's new, it's about how deep or how present, how coordinated being, thinking, and observing is that gives you the control of that as a human being. Mondays are tough. There's always a lot to talk about. Life can't live forever. Read between the lines and assume the point of view as your own sooner than later, or at least be aware of it, because to ignore it or to just discard the message or the point of view because the messenger is so easily default as flawed. If you want to survive as a Pilates instructor, be aware of this point of view and let it enhance your creativity and your, most importantly, the impact you have on your students. Read between the lines, see behind the curtain, add to and to, direct your thinking, Geist.